Welcome back from the ad break, and let's continue with our lesson. We are now going to wrap up this wonderful lesson that we had on functions and relationships, where we were focusing on the equivalent forms. Now, looking back at our concept map, remember we were showing how to move from a verbal representation to a flow diagram. Then next, we looked at moving from a flow diagram to a table representation. And lastly, we moved from those word representations to the formulas and equations. Then looking at the keywords that we were using throughout our lesson, that was the equation, the formula, and the equivalent forms. Those are the words that we were busy with throughout this lesson. Let's now look at the common errors, or the things that you should keep in mind when you are working with functions and relationships. So when we work with equivalent forms of representing functions, it is common to mix up the input values and the output values. So it is very common to mix up those two. Make sure that the input values belong to the respective output values. So what we are trying to say here is that each input value has its own output value. Do not mix the input and the output values up. Then, when determining a formula from a table representation, it is common to determine a formula that only works for the first term and assume that the formula works for all the other terms, or of course the output values. So make sure that the difference is found between consecutive terms to assist in determining the formula. So remember, before you can determine the formula from a table, make sure that it is coming from input values that are consecutive, or of course that follow each other. Let's end off our lesson with a nice challenge. So given the equation y is equals to 3x squared plus 7x minus 1, represent the equation in words as number 1, number 2 as a flow diagram, and number 3 in a table if the input values are the first 5 multiples of negative 2. That is a nice challenge, but I know that you can do it. That was a wonderful lesson. We thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.